The observation deck smelled like burnt circuitry and disappointment. Crix pressed 3 of his sensory appendages against the reinforced glass, watching the human female stand motionless in the training arena below. Around him, the other evaluators from the Galactic Defense Initiative shuffled their various limbs, mandibles clicking in what he'd learned to recognize as bureaucratic impatience. "Another failure," muttered Vaughn, the Quelthian administrator to his left. Her scales rippled with smug satisfaction. "I told the Council that recruiting from Earth was premature. They barely discovered faster than light travel 6 cycles ago." Crix said nothing. He'd been studying humans for 3 standard years now, ever since they'd stumbled into the greater galaxy with their noisy fusion drives, and their baffling tendency to laugh at danger. Something about this particular specimen bothered him, though he couldn't quite identify. The human's name was Lira Vance, age 24 by Earth reckoning, former soldier in one of Earth's countless military organizations. She'd scored admirably on the written examinations, demolished the physical conditioning trials, and had just spent the last 40 minutes in the combat simulation arena. 40 minutes of absolute stillness. "Should we retrieve her?" asked Jin, the 3rd evaluator. His species communicated primarily through bioluminescent patterns, which their translation devices rendered into monotone standard speech. "The trial ended 17 minutes ago. Protocol suggests mild neural damage from the simulation feedback." "Give her another moment," Crix heard himself say. Vaughn's head swiveled toward him with that disturbing flexibility her species possessed. "You're wasting time, Observer Crix. The human has clearly experienced a cognitive breakdown. It happens. Their neural architecture is notoriously fragile compared to established species." Down in the arena, Lira Vance stood in the exact center of the massive chamber. Her dark hair was pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, the style Crix found both practical and oddly aesthetic. Her eyes, the striking shade of green that Earth's database listed as uncommon, remained open, unblinking. The combat trial had been straightforward by GDI standards. Holographic enemies, simulated weapons, pain feedback set to 30% to avoid actual injury. Every recruit faced it. Most lasted between 8 and 15 minutes before the overwhelming numbers forced to surrender or incapacitation. Lira had lasted 40 minutes without moving. "I'm calling it," Vaughn announced, reaching for the emergency extraction controls. "Medical team to Arena 7. We have—" "Wait." Crix's dorsal spines lifted. An involuntary response to sudden realization. "Where are the proctors?" The observation deck fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. Jin's patterns flickered confusion. "The proctors are— They should be down there," Crix finished, pointing with his primary manipulator. 3 combat instructors. Standard oversight protocol. "Where are they?" Vaughn's scales went pale, shifting from green to a sickly yellow. Her clawed hand hovered over the control panel, suddenly uncertain. The arena below remained still. Lira Vance, motionless. The holographic enemies dissolved into pixels 17 minutes ago when the simulation ended, and no sign of Instructor Grell, Instructor Morphix, or Instructor Ton anywhere in the visible space. "Run playback," Crix ordered, his translator perhaps adding more urgency than he intended. From the beginning, Vaughn hesitated only a second before her fingers danced across the holographic controls. The observation deck's primary screen lit up with recorded footage, timestamp reading 43 minutes prior. Lira entered the arena, rolling her shoulders in that peculiar human gesture of preparation. The 3 instructors stood at their designated positions, Grell by the northern entrance, Morphix hovering near the eastern weapon racks, and Ton positioned at the southern observation point. "Standard configuration. Nothing unusual." "Begin trial," Grell's gravelly voice announced through the recording. The arena erupted with holographic hostiles. Crix had seen this simulation hundreds of times, wave after wave of enemies, each more difficult than the last, designed to test combat awareness, tactical thinking, and grace under pressure. Most recruits grabbed a weapon immediately, started fighting, started losing. Lira Vance closed her eyes. "Pause there," Crix said. The playback froze. Lira, eyes closed, standing completely still while holographic warriors charged toward her position. "Neural feedback?" Jin suggested. "No," Crix murmured. "Look at her breathing. Slow. Controlled. She's not panicking. She's not frozen. She's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Vaughn's question dripped with skepticism, but her scales had darkened further. Fear, Crix recognized. His colleague was afraid, though she'd never admit it. "Continue playback. Double speed." The recording accelerated. Holographic enemies swarmed Lyra's position, their weapons passing through her body because of course they were light constructs designed only to trigger the pain feedback when making contact. Except they weren't making contact. Lyra swayed, barely perceptible movements, letting each attack slide past her by millimeters. That's not possible, Vaughn whispered. The processing speed required to— She hasn't opened her eyes yet, Jin interrupted, his patterns flashing rapid amber. How is she tracking them without visual input? Crix's 4 hearts began beating in a regular rhythm. He'd studied Earth's military history. The concept of situational awareness. The warrior's sixth sense that some humans claim to develop through years of combat experience. He'd always assumed it was exaggeration, the kind of storytelling soldiers from every species engaged in. Maybe he'd been wrong. The playback continued. 5 minutes in, Lyra's eyes snapped open. She moved then, but nothing like a typical recruit's panicked flailing. Her movements were economical, precise. She didn't reach for weapons. Instead, she flowed between the holographic attackers using their own momentum against them, redirecting their strikes into each other. She's treating them like they're real, Crix said, realization dawning. Not as training constructs, as actual threats. But they're not real, Vaughn protested. There's no strategic value. She stopped talking because on the screen something impossible was happening. Instructor Grell moved from his position. Not the standard supervisory patrol but a direct approach toward the combat zone. His expression, usually stoic, showed concern. He raised his communicator probably to call for early termination. Lyra's hand shot out, faster than the playback could properly capture even at half speed. Her fingers locked around Grell's wrist. The massive Threxian instructor, easily 3 times her mass, suddenly found himself off balance, stumbling forward into the holographic battlefield. By the founders, Vaughn breathed. Instructor Morphix reacted immediately, wings spreading as he dove toward the situation. Instructor Tan moved in from the south, weapon drawn, set to stun. Lyra never looked at them directly. Didn't need to. She'd already changed position using Grell's considerable bulk as a shield against Morphix's aerial approach. Her foot hooked behind Grell's ankle with perfect timing, sending the instructor crashing into Morphix's flight path. Both instructors went down in a tangle of limbs and wings. Tan fired. The stun bolt lit up the arena with electric blue light. Empty air. Laura had moved again, somehow anticipating the shot before Tan's finger completed the trigger pull. She rolled under the energy beam, came up next to Tan's position, and delivered a strike to his neural cluster so precise that the Velaran instructor simply stopped. Not unconscious, not injured, just completely immobilized, his body locked in place by targeted pressure to his species' motor cortex junction. That technique, Jin said quietly. That's Velaran martial arts. Master level. How does a human know our biological vulnerabilities? Crix didn't answer because Lyra wasn't finished. Grell had recovered, roaring with what any species would recognize as fury. He charged, using the enhanced strength his people were famous for throughout the galaxy. A direct hit from a Threxian warrior could shatter reinforced duraplast. Against an unaugmented human, Lyra met the charge head-on. Stupid, Crix thought. Suicidal even. Except she wasn't trying to stop Grell's momentum. She redirected it using his own force against him, guiding the massive instructor's trajectory into the arena's western wall with a leverage technique that shouldn't have worked, couldn't have worked, but absolutely did work. The impact shook the entire chamber. Grell slumped against the wall, conscious but clearly reconsidering his life choices. That left Morphix. The Quelthian flight instructor had regained altitude, spiraling above the combat zone, wings beating with the speed and precision his species had evolved over millions of years. He had the advantage now. Height, mobility, perspective. Lyra picked up a piece of debris from Grell's impact, something that looked like a fragment of wall padding. She gauged its weight with a casual toss, caught it and threw. The projectile whistled through the air with the kind of velocity that spoke to Earth's gravity well, to the evolutionary pressure that had shaped human throwing capability into something remarkable. It hit Morphix's left wing joint with surgical accuracy. The instructor spiraled down, wings unable to maintain synchronized flight. His landing was controlled, professional even, but he made no move to rejoin the fight. Smart, Crix thought. Very smart. Lira Vance returned to the center of the arena, assumed her original position, closed her eyes. The holographic enemies continued their programmed assault for another 30 minutes, but they might as well have been attacking empty air. Every strike missed. Every combination found nothing but space where Lyra had been a fraction of a second before. When the simulation finally ended, she simply stood there, waiting. "Find them," Crix ordered. "Find the instructors. Now." Vaughn's fingers flew across the control panel, activating internal sensors. The scan results appeared on the secondary screen. 3 life signs. Arena 7. All conscious. All showing elevated stress hormones but no significant injury. "Where exactly are they?" Jen asked. The scan narrowed its focus. 3 life signs, clustered together in the Western equipment alcove, hidden behind the storage units that held backup training gear. All 3 instructors, hiding from the recruit. "Mother of stars," Vaughn whispered. "She's been standing there waiting for them to surrender." Crix felt something he rarely experienced: genuine amusement. Or maybe it was respect. With humans he was learning. The distinction often blurred. "Open communications channel to the arena," he said. A soft chime indicated the connection was active. "Recruit Vance," Crix said, his translator rendering his words into Earth's English language. "The trial has concluded. Please report to the observation deck for evaluation." For the first time in 17 minutes, Lira moved. She opened her eyes, looked directly at the observation window despite the one-way glass that should have prevented her from knowing they were watching, and smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a cruel one either. Something in between. The smile of someone who knew exactly what she'd done and was absolutely unapologetic about it. "On my way," she said, her voice clear and calm through the arena's audio system. She walked toward the exit with the casual confidence of someone who just passed a routine inspection rather than successfully neutralized 3 of the GDI's most experienced combat instructors and then waited politely for them to admit defeat. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. In the western alcove, barely visible on the high-resolution scan, the 3 instructors remained motionless, waiting, making sure she was really truly gone. Vaughn turned to face Crix, her scales now displaying a fascinating pattern of colors he'd never seen before. "We can't pass her," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She attacked instructors, ignored the simulation parameters, showed complete disregard for trial protocols. "She completed the trial," Jen countered. "The objective was to demonstrate combat capability under pressure. Mission parameters did not specify that holographic enemies were the only acceptable targets." "That's a technicality." "That's the regulations," Crix said quietly. He was already reviewing the official trial guidelines on his personal display. Jin was correct. The rules stated that recruits must demonstrate effective combat capability for the duration of the trial. Nothing about how that demonstration needed to occur. "She didn't even use weapons." Vaughn tried again, grasping at arguments. "How can we certify someone for GDI service who refuses standard equipment?" "I believe," Crix said, pulling up Earth's military database, "that there's a human saying that applies here. The body is a weapon. One simply needs to know how to use it." "Humans and their sayings," Vaughn muttered. "Next you'll tell me we should recruit her based on potential." "No," Crix said, closing his display. "We should recruit her based on results." The observation deck door opened. Lira Vance entered, not breathing heavily despite what should have been an exhausting trial. Her uniform, standard gray recruit coveralls showed minimal signs of wear. No tears. No scorch marks from near misses. Nothing to suggest she'd just survived 40 minutes of intensive combat. She approached the evaluation panel, stopped at the designated line, and stood at attention with military precision. "Recruit Vance," Vaughn began, her official tone brittle. "You have been called for evaluation regarding Trial 7 combat assessment. Do you understand the proceedings?" "Yes, Administrator." "Are you aware that you deviated substantially from expected trial parameters?" "I completed the trial objective." "Administrator. Combat capability under pressure. The parameters didn't specify which opponents I should engage, only that I demonstrate capability." Crix's dorsal spines twitched again. Amusement. Definitely. The human had read the regulations, probably before she ever entered the arena. "You attacked instructors," Vaughn pressed. "I defended myself against perceived threats," Lira corrected gently. "When Instructor Grell approached during active combat conditions, I responded to what appeared to be an additional challenge. My apologies if I misunderstood the situation." Her tone was perfectly respectful, her expression equally neutral, and yet Crix could see the intelligence dancing behind those green eyes. She knew exactly what she'd done. The question was why. "Why didn't you use weapons?" Jin asked, his patterns curious rather than accusatory. Lira's gaze shifted to the bioluminescent evaluator. "In real combat, Administrator, weapons can be lost, damaged, or turned against their user. I wanted to demonstrate capability without relying on external tools. If that was inappropriate, I accept responsibility. 3 instructors, Vaughn said flatly. You neutralized 3 instructors. Do you understand how that looks? For the first time, Lyra's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, more like satisfaction. It looks like I passed. Administrator. The observation deck fell silent again. Vaughn's scales cycled through 6 different color combinations in rapid succession. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You. She began, then stopped. Crix decided to intervene before his colleague experienced some kind of chromatic seizure. Tell me, Recruit Vance, he said, leaning forward slightly. Why did you wait? After the simulation ended, after you'd established dominance, you simply stood there. Why? Lira met his gaze directly. Most humans found his species' compound eyes disturbing, but she showed no discomfort, because, observer Crix, the trial objective was to demonstrate combat capability under pressure, not to humiliate dedicated instructors who were doing their jobs. Once the simulation ended and my point was made, there was no honor in continuing aggression. I waited for official evaluation as regulations require. Honor. That word again. Humans used it frequently, attached deep meaning to it. Most species had equivalent concepts, but humans seemed to structure entire identities around the principle. And your point was? Crix prompted. Now she did smile. Just a little. That sometimes the greatest threat isn't the one you're being told to focus on. The implications of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Crix considered them, considered her, considered what the Galactic Defense Initiative actually needed in its ranks. Soldiers who followed orders perfectly, or soldiers who understood when the real battle wasn't the obvious one. You're dismissed, Recruit Vance, he said finally. Evaluation results will be posted within the hour. She saluted, crisp and professional, then turned and exited the observation deck. The moment the door sealed, Vaughn rounded on Crix. You can't possibly be considering passing her. I'm not considering it, Crix replied calmly. I've already decided. She passes. Top marks. This is insane. She's dangerous. She's exactly what we need, Jin interjected, his patterns flashing agreement. The war isn't going well, Vaughn. You know this. We've been recruiting by the standard metrics for 3 cycles and losing ground every engagement. Maybe it's time we reconsidered what makes an effective soldier. She's human. They're aggressive, unpredictable, and we just watched one of them defeat 3 of our best instructors using nothing but situational awareness and tactical creativity. Crix finished. Earth's militaries have been conducting warfare continuously for their entire recorded history. Maybe there's something to be learned from that experience. Vaughn's scales settled into a deep purple. Resignation, Crix knew. She wasn't happy, but she also wasn't going to fight this battle further. Mark it in the record then, she said bitterly. When this experiment goes wrong, I want documentation that I objected. Noted, Crix said. He pulled up Lira Vance's file on his personal display, added his evaluation scores, marked her status as active duty, cleared for combat operation. Somewhere in the station's medical bay, 3 instructors were probably being treated for bruised egos more than bruised bodies. And somewhere else a human female was probably wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision. Crix suspected they'd all find out soon enough. The briefing room smelled like recycled air and tension. Crix settled into his observation position, watching as 12 newly certified recruits filed into the tactical center for their first operational assignment. Lira Vance entered third, her movements economical and precise. She took a seat in the middle row, neither seeking attention nor avoiding it. The other recruits gave her space. Word had spread quickly, as it always did in military installations. The human who'd put 3 instructors into hiding. The female who'd treated a combat trial like a philosophical debate about acceptable targets. Attention, barked Commander Threll, the Cartesian officer who'd oversee this operation. His species resembled what Earth databases called crustaceans, though that comparison failed to capture the intimidating presence of his armored exoskeleton and multiple combat appendages. You've been selected for Priority Mission 17. Transport vessel under attack. Civilian casualties estimated in the hundreds if we don't respond within the next 2 hours. A holographic display materialized above the briefing table, showing a mid-sized cargo hauler drifting in space. Red indicators flashed along its hull where weapons fire had breached the outer plating. The vessel is the Meridian Hope, registered to the Pelaxian Trade Consortium. 3 days ago it departed station Corvex carrying medical supplies and refugees from the Outer Rim conflicts. 12 hours ago it stopped responding to communication. 6 hours ago we received a brief distress signal before all transmissions ceased. Threll's primary claw pointed at several dark shapes visible near the Meridian Hope's hull. Scans indicate boarding pods. At least 4, possibly more. We're classifying this as hostile action by unknown forces, though intelligence suggests Crethan raiders based on the pod signatures. One of the other recruits, a Velaran named Six, raised a questioning appendage. Commander, if Crethan raiders have already boarded, aren't the civilians already lost? Standard raider protocol is immediate execution of witnesses. Standard protocol. Yes, Threll agreed. Which is why this situation doesn't make sense. The Meridian Hope is still intact. Life signs are still registering throughout the ship. Whatever's happening aboard that vessel, it doesn't match known raider behavior patterns. Crux felt his dorsal spines lift slightly. Anomalies were dangerous in military operations. Soldiers trained for expected scenarios. When reality diverged from expectations, casualties mounted quickly. Our objective is threefold, Threll continued. 1. Secure the civilian passengers. 2. Neutralize the hostile boarding party. 3. Determine why a simple raid has extended for 12 hours without conclusion. Mission duration is estimated at 4 hours once we dock. You'll work in 3 teams of 4. Team assignments are on your personal displays now. Crix checked his own screen, curious about the composition. His role was purely observational, documenting recruit performance for official records, but he wanted to see how Command had distributed the talent. Team Alpha, 6, Ren, Morpho, and Torvik. All experienced in close-quarters combat. Solid choices for initial breach. Team Beta, Jex, Callus, Vorn and Drax. Heavy weapons specialist, designed to handle fortified positions. Team Gamma, Lira Vance, Pip, Quinn and Zex. Crix's primary eyes narrowed. Team Gamma's composition was unusual. Pip was barely past adolescence by Drellic standards, though his species matured quickly. Quinn was a communications specialist with minimal combat training. Zex was a navigator who'd scored adequately on tactical exams but nothing exceptional. They'd given Lira the weakest team. Intentionally. Crix suspected, testing her, seeing if her combat trial performance translated to actual field operations, or if she'd simply gotten lucky against instructors who'd underestimated her. We depart in 30 minutes, Threll announced. Standard combat loadouts. Personal shields at maximum. Remember your training and return safely. Dismissed. The recruits filed out, heading toward the armory. Crix followed at a distance. Curious to see how Lira would prepare, the armory was organized chaos. Recruits selecting weapons and checking equipment with the nervous energy that always preceded first combat operations. Crix positioned himself near a maintenance alcove, observing without interfering. Lira moved through the weapon racks methodically. She passed the heavy plasma rifles that most recruits favored, ignored the photon carbines and pulse cannons. Instead, she selected a basic sidearm, 2 combat knives and a compact shield generator. That's it? Pip asked, his voice carrying across the armory. The young Drellix had loaded himself with enough weaponry to outfit 3 soldiers. We're going against raiders. Raiders, they've got military-grade equipment. You're taking knives? Lira checked the sidearm's charge indicator, satisfied, and holstered it. Tools are only as effective as the person using them, Pip. I'll be fine, but focus on your own loadout, she said gently. Make sure you can actually move with all that weight. Close-quarters combat is about speed and positioning. If you're weighed down, you're vulnerable. Pip's facial chromatophores flushed with embarrassment, but Crix noticed the young recruit started removing some of the heavier weapons from his harness. Quinn approached, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. Vance, I should tell you I'm not really combat trained. My scores were adequate, but I'm primarily communications. I saw your file, Lira interrupted, not unkindly. You're adaptable, fast learner, good under pressure according to your simulation results. That's more valuable than you think. But in actual combat, I need you to do exactly what you're good at. Maintain communications, monitor life signs, keep me informed of developing situations. Can you do that? Quinn's tentacles settled slightly. Yes, I can do that. Then we'll be fine. Zex joined them, the bulky navigator looking uncomfortable in combat gear. This is insane, he muttered. I plot courses. I calculate hyperspace coordinates. I don't shoot people. Hopefully you won't have to, Lira said. But if shooting becomes necessary, aim for center mass and breathe through it. Your physiology handles stress through respiratory control, right? Zax blinked in surprise. How did you? I read up on every species in our unit. Know your team. Know their capabilities. Know their limitations. Basic tactical principle. Crix found himself impressed despite his intention to remain objective. Most recruits barely learned the names of their team members before first deployment. Lira had apparently studied biological weaknesses and stress responses across multiple alien species. The transport shuttle's interior was cramped and smelled like machine oil and fear. Crix secured himself in the observer's harness, watching the three teams settle into their positions. Commander Threll stood at the front, reviewing final approach vectors with the pilot. 20 minutes to dock, the pilot announced. Minimal debris field. No active weapon signatures detected from the target vessel. Stay alert anyway, Threll ordered. If this is Cruthan raiders, they're patient. They'll wait until we commit to boarding before springing whatever trap they've prepared. The shuttle's engines hummed with steady power as they crossed the distance between the GDI Rapid Response Station and the Meridian Hope. Through the viewports, Crix could see the damaged cargo hauler growing larger, its hull scarred with weapons impacts but structurally intact. Life signs? Threll asked. Quinn checked her instruments, tentacles dancing across the controls. Still registering throughout the ship, Commander. Approximately 217 individual signatures. No significant clustering that would indicate hostage situations. Distribution seems almost random. Random, Threll repeated, mandibles clicking with displeasure. Raiders don't leave hostages wandering randomly. They consolidate, control, execute. Maybe they're not raiders, Lira said quietly. Every head in the shuttle turned toward her. Recruits didn't typically speak up during mission briefings, especially not to contradict command assessments. Threll's compound eyes fixed on Lira with what Crix recognized as dangerous interest. Explain, Recruit Vance. You said it yourself, Commander. The situation doesn't match expected patterns. Boarding pods but no consolidation. Life signs maintained but no communications. Weapons damage to the hull but the ship still pressurized and powered. She paused, choosing her words carefully. What if the boarding party isn't in control? What if something else is happening? Such as? I don't know, sir, but I think we should prepare for scenarios beyond standard raider encounters. Threll's mandibles clicked several more times. Crix couldn't tell if the commander was angry or thoughtful. Possibly both. Noted. Recruit. Will maintain tactical flexibility, but the mission parameters remain unchanged. Secure civilians. Neutralize hostiles. Determine situation. Clear. Clear, Commander. The shuttle shuddered slightly as magnetic clamps engaged with the Meridian Hope's docking port. Red lights shifted to amber, then green as the airlock cycled. Teams deploy, Threll ordered. Alpha Team went first, weapons raised, moving through the airlock with professional precision. Beta Team followed 20 seconds later, then Gamma. Lira entered the Meridian Hope with her sidearm drawn but pointed down, her posture alert but not aggressive. Peep followed close behind, still carrying too many weapons but moving more quietly than before. Quinn and Zax brought up the rear, scanning equipment active. Crix activated his personal recording device and followed at a safe distance. His role was documentation, not combat, and his species' physiology made him poorly suited for fighting regardless. The Meridian Hope's interior was cold, not the absolute cold of vacuum breach, but the uncomfortable chill that suggested environmental systems were running on minimal power. Emergency lighting cast everything in amber shadows, and the silence felt oppressive. Team Alpha report. Threll's voice crackled through the communication network. Forward cargo bay is empty, Commander. No hostiles. No civilians. Moving to secondary compartments. Beta Team, engineering section clear. Power systems are operational, but someone's locked them into minimal output mode. No contacts yet. Gamma? Lira pressed her communicator. Passenger deck. Multiple life signs registering on scanners but no visual contact. Permission to investigate? Granted. Maintain communication every 2 minutes. Threll out. The passenger deck stretched ahead of them. A long corridor lined with cabin doors. Most were closed. A few hung open, revealing empty rooms with personal belongings scattered about. Signs of hasty evacuation but not violent struggle. Quinn, Lira said softly. Life sign details. What exactly are we detecting? The communications specialist consulted her instruments, tentacles trembling slightly. Humanoid biosignatures. Pelaxian, Varthian, some Terran actually. All showing normal vital indicators. Heart rates elevated but not critical. No distress markers, so they're alive, aware, and hiding. Sex offered. Or trapped, Lira countered. She approached one of the closed cabin doors and knocked gently. Not the aggressive breach technique Alpha Team was probably employing elsewhere, but a civilized request for attention. No response. She tried the door control locked. Can you override it? She asked Quinn. Probably. Give me a moment. The communication specialist extended a tentacle to the control panel, her natural biological interface abilities allowing her to connect directly with the ship's systems. That's strange. What is? The door is not locked from our side. It's locked from the inside. Someone engaged the privacy seal. Lira's eyes narrowed. So the passengers locked themselves in. Looks like it. Why would they? A sound cut through the silence. Not a scream exactly. More like a wet tearing noise followed by something heavy hitting a bulkhead. It came from deeper in the passenger section, maybe 30 meters ahead. Team Gamma to command, Lira said into her communicator. Contact with unknown situation. Investigating. Negative, Gamma. Hold position and wait for Alpha or Beta to support. Lira's jaw tightened. Crix recognized the expression. He'd seen it during her combat trial. The look of someone who'd already decided to ignore orders but was trying to figure out how to justify it later. Another sound. Closer this time. Definitely organic. Definitely distressed. Commander. Civilians may be in immediate danger. Request permission to advance. I said hold position, recruit. Copy that, command. Holding. She released the communicator button and turned to her team. Peep. Zex. Maintain this position. Quinn. You're with me. We're going to investigate quietly. If something goes wrong, you two get back to the shuttle and report. But the commander said. Zex started. The commander said hold position. You're holding position. I'm taking point with our communications specialist to gather information. Totally different operational parameters. It was sophistry and everyone knew it. Crix watched Pip and Zex exchange glances, saw them arrive at the same conclusion he'd already reached. Lira was going with or without them. At least this way someone would be able to report what happened. 2 minutes, Zex said finally. If you're not back in 2 minutes, we're calling it in and coming after you. Fair enough. Lira moved down the corridor with Quinn trailing behind, tentacles wrapped tightly around her scanning equipment. Crix hesitated, then followed. His documentation role included recording recruit decisions, even questionable ones. The amber emergency lighting made everything look worse than it probably was. Shadows twisted into threatening shapes. Every sound seemed magnified. Crix found his breathing apparatus working harder, pulling oxygen faster than necessary, a stress response his species had never evolved past. Ahead, Lira paused at an intersection. The wet tearing sound had stopped, replaced by something that might have been breathing. Heavy, labored, wrong somehow. She gestured for Quinn to check the scanner. Life sign ahead, the communications specialist whispered. 20 meters. Single contact. Biosignature is odd. Odd how? Registering as multiple species simultaneously. Like the scan can't decide what it's detecting. Could be equipment malfunction, or something we haven't encountered before. Lira murmured. She raised her sidearm slightly, not quite targeting but ready. Stay behind me. If something goes wrong, run. Don't be a hero. They rounded the corner. The thing in the corridor defied immediate classification. It had the general structure of something that might once have been Pelaxian, the multi-limbed merchants who made up the bulk of the Meridian Hope's passenger manifest, but its flesh rippled with chromatic distortions, colors shifting through patterns no natural biology should produce. Its limbs bent at angles that suggested either multiple joint breaks or a fundamental restructuring of skeletal architecture. It was crouched over another passenger, someone who wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, whose body showed the same chromatic distortions spreading across their skin like infection. The thing's head swiveled toward them with mechanical precision. Its eyes, if they were eyes, reflected the emergency lighting like polished chrome. Contact, Lira said into her communicator, her voice remarkably steady. Hostile unknown entity. Passenger deck, Section 7. Request immediate backup. On our way, Threll responded. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not. The thing launched itself forward with impossible speed. Lira fired 3 times. Center mass, just like she'd taught Zex. The plasma bolts hit, burning through whatever material composed the thing's exterior, but it didn't slow down, didn't even seem to notice. She dove left, rolling past the attack, came up already moving. Quinn, run. The communications specialist didn't need to be told twice. Her tentacles propelled her back down the corridor faster than Crix would have thought possible. The thing pivoted, tracking Lyra's movement with that same mechanical precision. Up close, Crix could see details he wished he couldn't. The chromatic distortions weren't just visual, they were dimensional. The thing's surface existed in multiple states simultaneously, flickering between solid matter and something else, something that hurt to look at directly. Lyra didn't try to fight it. Smart, Crix thought distantly. She'd learned from her combat trial. Pick battles you can win. Avoid the ones you can't. She ran. The thing followed, moving with a lurching gait that covered distance faster than its awkward appearance suggested. Crix pressed himself against the bulkhead as both human and monster rushed past his position. His recording device captured everything. His survival instinct screamed at him to shut it off and hide. He did neither. All teams converge on passenger section 7. Threll's voice boomed through the communication network. Unknown hostile confirmed. Weapons free. Repeat. Weapons free. Lira reached the intersection where Pip and Zex waited. Both recruits had their weapons raised, their expressions showing the kind of fear that preceded either heroic stands or complete collapses. Shoot it, Lira shouted. They did. Plasma bolts, pulse rounds, even one of Pip's excessive explosive charges. All of it hit. All of it seemed to have minimal effect. The thing's chromatic distortions, absorbed impacts, redistributed energy, flickered in and out of phase with reality itself. Fall back, Lira ordered. Fighting retreat to the shuttle. Alpha team arrived from the opposite direction, their weapons adding to the sustained fire. The thing paused, surrounded by hostile forces, its chrome eyes reflecting the muzzle flashes of a dozen weapons. Then it did something that made Crix's multiple hearts skip synchronized beats. It split, not like biological division, more like reality photocopying itself incorrectly. One creature became two, both identical, both equally wrong. Then 4, then 8. Command, we need immediate extraction, Lira said into her communicator, still backing toward the shuttle while maintaining covering fire. Whatever this is, conventional weapons aren't effective. Negative on extraction, Gamma. We need specimens. Need to understand what we're facing. Lyra's expression went flat. Crix recognized it from her trial. The look that meant she'd just decided command was wrong and was about to do something about it. Quinn, she said. Those locked cabin doors, can you open them remotely? All of them at once? Probably, but why would? Because I don't think the passengers are hiding from raiders. I think they're hiding from these things. And I think they know something we don't. Open every door in this section. Now. Quinn's tentacles flew across her portable interface. Throughout the passenger section, door locks disengaged with synchronized clicks. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then doors began opening. Passengers emerged. Not with the hesitation of terrified civilians, but with the coordination of people executing a practiced drill. They moved into the corridor holding items that definitely weren't standard passenger luggage. Devices that hummed with power, crystals that glowed with internal light. One elderly Pelaxian held what appeared to be a religious artifact, though its technological components suggested purposes beyond the spiritual. The things, all 8 of them now, paused in their advance, their chrome eyes fixed on the passengers, and for the first time since this encounter began, Crix saw something that might have been recognition, or possibly fear. The elderly Pelaxian raised their artifact and spoke in a language the translators struggled with, ancient words that predated galactic common speech by millennia. The devices activated. The crystals pulsed. Reality bent. The thing screamed, a sound that existed across multiple frequency ranges simultaneously, then began collapsing inward. Not dying exactly, more like being forcibly compressed back into whatever dimensional space they'd emerged from. Their chromatic distortions inverted, contracted, and finally disappeared with a sound like breaking glass. Silence returned to the Meridian Hope. The elderly Pelaxian lowered their artifact, looking directly at Lira with what might have been approval. You freed us, they said in perfect galactic common. You had no contextual knowledge, no understanding of the threat, but you recognized the pattern. Civilians hiding. Sustained threat presence. You extrapolated correctly that we had information relevant to combat effectiveness. Who are you? Lira asked. What were those things? We are the keepers of thresholds. This vessel was transporting more than refugees and medical supplies. We carry dimensional artifacts, items that exist partially outside conventional spacetime. Sometimes, Rarely, these artifacts attract attention from beings that exist beyond our standard reality. When the breach occurred, we sealed ourselves away and activated suppression fields. The creatures cannot manifest fully while our devices remain operational. But we cannot leave our sanctuaries without losing field integrity. Why didn't you communicate this? Commander Threll demanded, having arrived with the remaining forces. We lost time. Almost lost personnel. We tried, the elder Pelaxian interrupted. Your translators cannot process our ancient protocols. Your equipment cannot detect our encrypted transmissions. We have been shouting into the void for 12 hours, hoping someone would understand. And I just happened to guess correctly? Lira asked skeptically. No, young human. You applied tactical creativity combined with pattern recognition and willingness to trust instinct over protocol. These qualities are rare in the galaxy. Your species specializes in them. Crix found himself nodding unconsciously. Earth's military history showed exactly that pattern. Improvisation. Adaptation. Success born from unconventional thinking when conventional approaches failed. The threat is neutralized? Threll asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced. For now, the breach is sealed. But this is not the last time such incidents will occur. The dimensional barriers are weakening. The galaxy faces threats your defense initiative was not designed to combat. Then we'll adapt, Lira said simply. That's what we do. The Pelaxian elder studied her with eyes that seemed far older than their physical body. Yes, they said finally. Perhaps you will. The return shuttle ride was quiet. Crix reviewed his recordings, compiling his official report. Around him, the recruits processed their first combat operation with varying degrees of success. Pape looked shell-shocked. Vex seemed grateful to still be breathing. Quinn's tentacles had finally stopped trembling. Lyra sat with her eyes closed, possibly sleeping, possibly reviewing the mission in her mind. Crix suspected the latter. Commander Threll approached his observation position, mandibles clicking softly. Your assessment, observer. Crix considered his words carefully. Recruit Vance demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness, adaptive thinking and leadership capability under completely novel circumstances. She also flagrantly disregarded direct orders, operated outside established protocols, and made decisions based on incomplete information that could have resulted in team casualties. So she's dangerous, extremely. But perhaps the right kind of dangerous for what's coming. Threll's compound eyes reflected the shuttle's interior lighting. The keepers mentioned weakening dimensional barriers. Threats we're not prepared for. You believe the human is suited for such scenario. I believe humans evolved solving novel problems in hostile environments. Every species develops strengths based on their evolutionary pressures. Humanity's pressure was constant adaptation or extinction. They learned to think creatively because conventional thinking got them killed. Crix gestured toward Lyra with one appendage. She represents that evolutionary heritage operating at peak efficiency. She also represents a command structure nightmare. How do you give orders to someone who treats protocols as suggestions? Perhaps you don't give her orders. Perhaps you give her objectives and trust her to find the path. Threll clicked his mandibles one final time. That's not how military organizations function. Observer. No, Crix agreed. But military organizations designed for conventional warfare also don't function well against dimensional breaches and reality distortions. We're entering unknown territory, Commander. Maybe it's time we had guides who specialize in the unknown. The shuttle docked with the main station. Recruits filed out, heading toward debriefing and medical evaluations. Lyra passed Crix's position, paused, and met his eye. Thank you, she said, quietly. For what, recruit? For recommending my commission after the combat trial. I saw the file notes. You went to bat for me despite the irregularities. You earned it, maybe. Or maybe I just got lucky. In my experience, Recruit Vance, luck is what we call preparation meeting opportunity. You prepared better than anyone anticipated. The opportunities you created were your own. She smiled. That same expression from the arena. Not quite friendly. Not quite challenging. Something uniquely human. Let's hope I can keep getting lucky then. Something tells me we're going to need it. She continued toward debriefing, leaving Crix alone with his recording equipment and his thoughts. 3 cycles ago, the Galactic Defense Initiative had approached Earth as a curiosity. A young species with potential but limited practical experience in interstellar affairs. 3 cycles from now, Crix suspected, they'd view Earth as essential. The galaxy was changing. Threats emerging that conventional forces couldn't handle, and standing between known civilization and unknown horrors were soldiers like Lira Vance, humans who'd spent their entire evolutionary history learning to face impossible odds with nothing but creativity and courage. Crix uploaded his report to the official archives, flagged it for command review, and added a personal note. Recommendation: expand Earth recruitment. Prioritize candidates demonstrating adaptive tactical thinking over conventional combat scores. The threats ahead will not respect our established patterns. We need soldiers who don't respect them either. He sealed the report and headed toward his quarters. Behind him, the Meridian Hope was being towed to dock for repairs. Its passengers, the keepers of thresholds, were already in consultations with GDI intelligence. And somewhere on this station, a human female was probably reviewing her performance, identifying mistakes, planning improvements. The galaxy had no idea what it was in for. Crix found himself looking forward to documenting every moment of it.